want to begin by first saying that Scott Green will not be with us today. He stayed back in Seattle. His wife, Lynn, had surgery and needed some help. And so he won't be with us, so it won't be a 2 to 2.5 hour workshop as on the program. Good afternoon. How do you end up with a topic like this? You know, my wife and I actually launched an enterprise called Bridging International. It's January the 1st, 2014. And that is going out into nonprofits, churches, organizational health, congregational health, conflict resolution. And we'd had an exciting engagement before we went full-time doing this that taught us this is what we want to do. And then over the following 2.5 years, we started to realize that every single gig, engagement, whatever you want to call it, on the ground with people had this dynamic that take place where somebody who had the right idea went about it the wrong way. And I'm also a history buff. And I've been doing a lot of reading on the Renaissance and progressive moments in history where there's a big burst of learning and progress and developments and integrating of different fields. I've looked at the arts, the sciences, and voyaging, medicine, organizational development, technology, and so forth. And there's people that do it really, really well and people that don't. And so to be a wavemaker is a special, maybe even sometimes a lonely role, and the entities that matter to you the most. You know change is needed, but do you have what it takes, you yourself? Not everybody will walk out of here today thinking, you know, I'm a wave maker. And that's quite okay, because you can support the waves that others start. But this will give you at least awareness of the concept and some of the disciplines and practices that are important to really do a great job. I guarantee I got some very inspirational stories to waken you up to this concept. But you know, the people that didn't do so well and becoming a wave maker, they did something that is called flaming out. Flaming out describes when someone enthusiastically attempts to improve their organization, they meet resistance or failure, resulting in bad feelings and expired energy. The personal casualties can include the loss of relationships, reputation, or positions, in addition to workplace morale problems among their peers and those caught in the middle, and of course that applies to church. I've seen people flame out, and I've seen them do it in such a way that they've lost their reputation, their face, sometimes even their marriages. They lose their faith. And so we want to equip you, Scott and I, as we dreamed about this time together today, is to equip you to be part of winning wave making. Okay, because there is a right way to do it, and we see it even in the Scripture. You know, Edward Gibbon was one of the famous historian of Roman history. Anybody that reads about Roman history reads Gibbon. He said, the winds and waves are always on the side of the ablest navigators. So the winds are going to come from sorts of different directions. You may even start it. But the most important thing is to learn how to navigate change when it comes at you by surprise or when you are actually attempting to instigate it. We're going to talk about lessons learned in making waves here first. And there are a few people that are worth studying who really nailed it very good. Daniel said, basically, it says in the book, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. And he said, please test your servant for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of a young men who eat at the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance to what you see. He was prayerful. He was thoughtful. He was respectful. He asked questions. He said, test us. He respected even the culture of the situation. And he won. He won. And he won without hurting them. And he won and added value in Babylon. And he won and escalated up the channels to be very high in significance. That's what the kind of win we want to talk about is wave making. We're going to look at 5 individuals that cover different periods, different contexts of the waves that they were trying to make, different lessons that they teach us. Who is this first picture up on the top left? Okay. Frederick Douglass, I learned more about him in the past couple of months than I knew before, just from high school. Born in a slave family, had been owned by numerous slaves. He had an engagement one time with the reputed slave breaker, the person that could break a slave into submission, and he couldn't do it with Douglass. And he escaped, ended up writing the best-known slave narrative, really, of all time, certainly that century. But one of the things he did while he was a slave made all the difference on the other side. In defiance of one of his masters, he thought, I'm going to read his books, and I'm going to learn. Not only am I going to learn, I'm going to understand. And in doing so, he was equipping himself for the right time. When I went to Lipscomb recently, about 5 years ago, to get my master's in conflict management, the first week of class, I heard a professor say, the right thing at the wrong place, right thing the wrong way, the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. Because sometimes it's just not going to happen on our timetables. But while we are praying, nudging, persisting, hoping, planning for change, we can prepare ourselves. And that's what he did. And then he became very influential, even in the women's rights movement. He became very eloquent, eventually got to the ear of the presidents, including Abraham Lincoln, super significant in that crucial decade of the 1860s, and then went on to take on many political posts. And so as we look at Frederick Douglass, we have to ask ourselves, what does he teach us? He teaches us, if you possess a fearless determination to learn, to understand, to be understood, and to speak out against injustices, you can make a wave. And he did. He made a significant wave. Ignaz Semmelweis. Not too many people have heard about him, but you have been majorly influenced by his life. He made a wave that had such a great impact that you're probably owed the fact that you were ever born to him. He was a Hungarian physician in a hospital. The disease, now called the avian flu, was rampant, insidious killer in Western hospitals, targeting mothers of newborn children, often threatening to turn those babies into motherless orphans just days after their birth. And massive numbers of women were dying in the hospitals. And so he noted that women were statistically much safer having babies at home than doctors who delivered babies that had not cleaned their hands after handling cadavers. The prevailing thought at the time in the 1840s was that the sickness and disease was an airborne thing. Bad odor. Stinky places is how you die. And hospitals were stinky. So he ordered a change in hygiene for the doctors. And in doing so, he reduced the mortality rate from 35% to less than 1%. But here's the part you got to understand. He didn't do so well after this. He was ridiculed by his peers because he couldn't explain why it works. And so he got frustrated, and he got agitated. He became outraged, so much so that he insulted the medical establishment, and he eventually was straitjacketed and died from gangrene after beatings from guards in an asylum. After his death, the first French chemist Louis Pasteur, pioneering microbiologist, and British surgeon Joseph Lister, that helped develop germ theory, confirmed the findings of Semmelweis over the next 2 to 3 decades. Here's the key. He was observant. He was practical. He was persistent, but he wasn't self-controlled. And outrage is often overrated. So we'll take the lesson from Ignaz, both the positive and the not so positive. Connie Rice, one of my favorite Wavemakers, cousin of Condoleezza Rice, 2/5 African American, part Native American, and part Asian and white. She noticed that African American kids nearby, and she grew up in Arizona, I believe, did not have the privileges she did. She grew up with privilege. And it bothered her why skin color could allow such a thing to happen. She goes on to pursue law, And she works in LA as an NAACP legal defense fund attorney. Was considered a pariah almost immediately after she arrived around 1991. She took on the LA Police Department for what she called a centurion warrior model of policing. Their brutality menaced at a level greater than even the gangs. So people wanted to be aligned more with the gangs than the LAPD for their own safety. It was so out of control. A lawlessness was rampant as well. Her first big contest in 1991 is when she saw that the canine units were devastating young black males and causing more deaths than the other 95% of the LA Police Department, or more hospitalizations. And so she reduced this down drastically to in the low single digits when a canine is involved putting somebody in the hospital. Through the 1990s and early 2000s, she had taken on, I think, at least 350 lawsuits against the LAPD. But she was a tempered woman. She knew her stuff. She was righteous and she was approachable. She wasn't some loud-mouthed person that gets in front of a camera and polarizes people. She was just concerned about the treatment of African Americans. And so in 2002, she was asked by a new police commissioner to partner with him and others in an investigation into scandals and corruption in the LAPD. And she had a major impact and became, from then till the time she retired a few years ago, very integrated into the organization of the LAPD, dealing with corruption, solving problems, and being kind of a reference for the LAPD to look into matters as an objective person. What does she teach us? To thoroughly investigate, be reasonable, respectful, respectable, and on the right side of the history of things. Carmen Medina. Carmen Medina worked for the CIA for decades. But in the late 90s, she felt like all the different departments of learning about security in the U.S. weren't sharing with each other. They kept their information to themselves. She thought that was crazy. She spoke up. She got in a lot of conflict. She flamed out. She hurt her own reputation. They brought her down to the bottom of the CIA, about as low as you can get. And she made mistakes. Then 9/11 happened. And people go, wait, Carmen told us we should have been sharing all this information. If we had had all this information among, CIA, FBI, and the other departments, we could have prevented this disaster. And it's actually true. We could have prevented this thing. And so she's vindicated. And between about 2003 and 2012, she held many posts escalating back up in the CIA and especially led the way in harmonizing and bringing together all the information in an electronic way for people to share. And one of the authors that turned me on to the story of her, Adam Grant, said, to land that CIA deputy director position, she needed to learn to communicate differently, to speak up in ways that won credibility instead of losing it. She's the co-author of a book called Rebels at Work, which I'll be quoting from here. A great book, Carmen Medina. She teaches us to be self-aware, earn credibility, develop important relationships, along with being right. And the cool thing is you can flame out and come back if you're self-reflective. Heather Brooke, cool story. She is a woman born in 1970 that has citizenship both in the U.S. and in Britain. She was a journalist. She is a journalist, and she was working with Julian Assange. We all know him, the WikiLeaks deal. She's known for two things. She saw how strange and bizarre and maybe not so good a character that gentleman was and is, and she broke rank with him and then kind of unveiled who he was and wrote a book about him. But she's most known for a 5-year dogged investigation into the UK's Parliament's spending. People could write themselves checks for TVs, apartments, mortgages. It was scandalous. And she went after it using the Freedom of Information Act, all the channels. She did everything by the book. She exhausted the system until the system worked and got the House of Commons Speaker Michael Martin fired and inspired policy changes, and has written books on things like how to use the information we have. And she's a process person. She's real well known. What does she teach us? Persist, investigate, make use of existing channels, and serve the greater good. I could have right now just made note of quite a few really bad stories, just to be honest with you. And there's a book called Wavemakers, from a Christian perspective, and it tells stories of people that had the right idea, really got messed up, and to do it. Instead of talking about what people did wrong, today is about how you can do it right. You know, many organizations have this kind of situation. An employee would be more productive, or somebody will say, our employees will be more productive if the company's vision, if they could work from home. That may be just an opinion. Hey, could we make a slight change? We could be more productive at home. Or I think I know why there's low morale in my department. I'd like to speak up about that. Or we are not making full use of our resources and skills to be more effective. We are having significant turnover with talented people, and I may be the next to leave. I feel micromanaged, which is draining my energies, but I really believe in our product. It's interesting that as Trish and I have been doing this work for the past couple of years, people have been approaching me about dysfunction in their workplace. How do I talk to my boss? I might be about to be fired. There's this scandal going on. There's an elephant in the room. There's a sacred cow. There's a naked emperor. You know, there's all sorts of stuff going on, you know, and I need somebody to talk to. And I end up talking to people in that way. The stuff that goes on in the world happens in the church, too, because any entity, if I was leading it, any entity I would lead, over time, you normalize things. You don't see things, and there becomes legacy issues, and you become less familiar with maybe you're not as fresh to see what's really going on. And there's ways to get around that, and part of it is having Wavemakers in the church. You know, we're not reaching demographics of our city with the gospel because of ... My visitors are not returning when I ask them. I regularly hear this. People don't volunteer as much as they used to, and I'm overwhelmed, Kingdom kids. I don't share the views of authority and direction of your generation, you know, a Christian at the bottom of the tier to the evangelist maybe, which I perceive to be. There's a gap between how a millennial, a Gen X, you know, boomer, and a senior generation will view some things. And how do you have that conversation? The vision of our congregation sounds very 1970-ish, but I would be more inspired by, you know, if we could do this. Some people are really good. They have a high EQ to start that conversation. Some people have a really high EQ and can receive that conversation. But the fact of it is, we're much more complicated than just EQ issues. We don't know which words to use. We may use the wrong words to describe the situation. We might be using inflammatory models and words and concepts that we don't even know. We might there might be a big gap of understanding between what we think needs to change and what else is really going on in the organization we're trying to change, especially if it's church. A little bit later, we're going to break into exercises with a very realistic case study. It's going to probably sound like a lot of congregations with a real situation. And out of that, we're going to develop a roadmap on how to handle these kinds of things, okay? So here's the 5 principles, guiding principles, that I believe the best Wavemakers would want you to know. Humble statement here, okay? I've been a Wavemaker most of my Christian life, and I've done it wrong. And I've done it right. I've had people try to move waves towards my direction. I've kind of been around it quite a bit. And I remember one particular wave I tried to make, it crashed so badly. And in some ways, that's why I got into this field. I want to get ahead. I don't want to live in the status quo in my Christian life. I want to see great things happen. I want to leave a legacy for our children and their friends, and as you do, where they can inspire change and they know how to do it. They might have an idea how to break into a new segment of their city or their state that we would have never thought of. I don't want to say we tried that a long time ago. You know, a 50-year-old to tell a 25-year-old, hey, you know, we tried that a long time ago, it didn't work. But the 50-year-old didn't try it in 2016. The game has changed. The personalities are different. And so we got to develop this relationship, make this part of our culture of adaptability. And I believe these 5 principles, these guiding principles, will be supported by great Wavemakers. Mentoring. Smart man makes a mistake, learns from it, and never makes that mistake again. But a wise man finds a smart man and learns from him how to avoid the mistake altogether. You know, I'm 57, and a bunch of us that were born around 1959, we have a lot of stories that we could pass on to give to these 20s and 30s something. And they don't, you know, they can say, well, that was a mistake back then, but it may not be a mistake now, and that may be true. You know, they have to learn for themselves. We've got to let the leash go for people to be free to make mistakes, and create a supervisor or / mentor role without trying to shut down something. Because we, 57-year-olds, may go, wow, I wish I would have thought of that back in 1985. That probably would have been good back then. You know, so we're going to learn from each other across, I believe, across roles and gender and authority and position and age if we do this. So let's create a world of mentoring. You know, a lot of weird kids come out of college really weird, I'm telling you. They do. You know, from the cradle to the grave, there's just, people want to hold on to the college years before they go into the singles. And there's just, we need to mentor people my age. That's the call to mentor these folks. Help them write a good resume, dress well, you know, be of sane mind, because just 5-10 years down the road, the church will be theirs. And so we got to get them ready. Okay, respect. Carmen Medina, your co-author, said, the more prepared, gracious, and respectful you are towards people who don't share your views, the more you establish your reputation as a credible professional to be taken seriously. As rebels, she likes to call herself a rebel, we can spend too much time thinking about our ideas and not enough time planning how to discuss them productively, especially when things get uncomfortable or heated. And that's the last portion of our time today, the exercise, how to do it productively. Respect is a big component. Proactivity. Be a problem solver, not a problem pointer. When you notice flaws, mistakes, or weaknesses, don't just point them out. Offer detailed solution with your observations. Be proactive in seeking out potential issues and creating solutions. Okay, processes. I love this one here. The more we understand how things work at work, the more likely we will figure out the best way to get support for our ideas and make them a reality. We can't change the culture and its associated politics and cultural norms. We can, however, learn the organizational environment well enough to navigate it to increase our chances of success. Here's a very common conversation I have. You know, I want to talk to my minister in my city about this thing. I just felt it for a really, really long time, and I just don't think that they understand. It might be something like, we use insider language all the time at church, and our visitors don't want to come back. You know, we're kind of colloquial, and we come across like we're a sports team on Sunday morning, and you know, my intellectual visitors, they want something very different than that. Okay, how do you have that conversation? It's hard to actually change a cultural thing like that, you know. And so I say, especially when it's a thing that's going to take a lot of energy, I tell them, go talk to your minister, have a coffee, and ask them how their world works, the burdens that they carry, the things that are on their mind, the things they're trying to change. Because then you might be able to fit what you want into the program with what they want. And if they tell you 3 or 4 things they're working on, say, you know, there's one thing that I would like to contribute working on. Would you be interested in hearing my thoughts? I can write up a half-page letter. I've been thinking about it a long time. I believe God's put it on my heart. You know what? That minister is going to be so grateful. You stepped into their world, listened to their story, their burdens, their challenges. You might actually help change some of the things that they're concerned about. And then you insert something onto their table. They're going to be like, you're a partner. You know? Be the change. We welcome dissatisfaction as the source of craving for the good. But we never accept whining or criticizing of others or critiques of society. If you don't like it, go fix it. Go create a world, a community, a subculture in which your ideals can be instantiated. It really means, embraced. Realized, in which you can show us what your vision of beauty and nobility looks like. Create a new social reality so that I can see your dreams come true. Criticize by creating. Michael Strong. Wow, that's a great one. That's a great one. I shared this with one of the editors of my material and went through it, and this was a standout quote. Wow, I love that. Criticize by creating. And if you are a creative person, and you have ideas, and you're so curious, and all the time things are bouncing off of you, and you're frustrated, here is an outlet for your creativity. Come up with ideas. Suggest pilots. We have this idea of how we can reach this segment of society that's not coming to church. I would like to pilot an idea. That could be the wave that you want to make. A little bit later we're going to talk about how to start that wave the most proper way. So here's what we're going to do right now. We are going to take a break, okay? Not to leave the room, of course, if you need to, But I'm going to ask that small groups, it could be 3, 4, 5, 6, circle up. We have a lot more people here than I thought. There were only 200 sheets, the single sheet that's handed out. If you have a phone and you've got good connection, you can download it. But the slides are also downloadable, but also the one sheet. And what I want you to do is to discuss a glossary that's on this sheet. And it's about, I'd say 16 different words. We're going to come back after you guys discuss it. I'm going to hear from you. I'll come walking out there with the microphone and find out what you think that word means and how to use it in a conversation. What you see in this diagram on the screen here is a diagram that was born in probably the early 60s. The concept of being outside the box most likely came from, here's a problem to solve, A. How can we cut through every single dot with just 4 lines? And the inside the box thinker gets to B. And the person who did never buy in the fact that I can't go outside the box came up with a way to do it and crossed all the dots. Because they never heard you can't go outside the box. That was never a rule to begin with anyway. And so it takes that fresh person. And so that, in corporate America, that is where we got outside the box. And so, anyway, that's more than you probably wanted to hear or need to know. But that's one of the phrases in the little list. And I'll tell you why when we come back, why all those phrases are important to use them the right way. Go ahead and form groups and begin the conversation. Thank you. Yes.
You said we could download the slides.
Yes.
How do we download that?
It's through the Reach app.
Through the Reach app, thank you.
Yes. I'd like to read a quote from a book called Thanks for the Feedback, The Science and Art of Receiving Feedback. This particular portion of the book where the quote came from is about how to talk to your leader. And before you tell me how to do it better, before you lay out your plans for changing, fixing, improving me, before you teach me how to pick myself up and dust myself off so I can be shiny and successful, know this, I've heard it before. I've been graded, rated, and ranked, coached, screened, and scored. I've been picked first, picked last, not picked at all, and that was just kindergarten. Your boss, your manager, your house church leader, your evangelist, your elder, they're people. And they've had things come their way and they're managing stuff. And sometimes things are going on in their life, personally, that are not manifest out into the open space. And so that's just to be mindful. And there are 2 kinds of people in this room, and an oversimplification. I know this is an oversimplification, but you tend to be either a converger or a diverger. And when we are in roles where we have a lot of responsibilities, we are convergers. We're building something. We're trying to coalesce energy, ideas, relationships towards something we have in our mind. And if we're good, it's a vision, mission, statement, core values. It's really clear. But we have ideas and we have some sort of a structure. We're trying to go in a direction, and it's about building that. And then some people are convergers that don't have leadership, but they just like to follow. They like to be led. And they like to have a position and respect their leaders and all that. And they make a lot of things happen. And they help us pull ourselves together when there's problems. And they make sure that we still have communion trays and Kingdom Kids workers. And they're just followers. And we should not demean convergers that are at that level, or those convergers that are not very creative because they've been trying to build for a long time the same way. Because that's what often just happens when you have a role as a converger. You start to normalize things. And then we have divergers. These are people that are so creative, always thinking outside the box, thinking new ideas, try this, try that. And they're the ones that help us break into new territory, make things interesting, add pizzazz to a worship or an idea that's already existing, make it better. The interesting thing about our convergers, our church leaders are typically convergers, but they started out as divergers. Our movement was a diverger movement. And we did a lot of that right, and not all of it right, and some of it very poorly. But diverging is great. Converging is great. And they actually need each other. And this is important to see before we get into the glossary. You know, there is a strength of the build and accomplish of the converger. There's a weakness, which was conformity to rank and roles and a status quo sometimes. That can be a pathway, culture we'd fall into. The divergers help us solve and create, and, give us upside down and stuff like this, but sometimes when we are a diverger, we can be so all over the place, ADD, that we want something different every Sunday, and it's confusing to implement every single one of our ideas. And not all of our ideas are good. They all need to be tested and vetted, or at least piloted or whatever. So you may find yourself in one of these categories. I'm going to just take a straw poll here. How many people feel like you are most normally a converger, a builder, an accomplisher? Okay. How many here feel like you're more of a diverger? You know what that's so exciting to me? What's so exciting to me is it's almost 50-50. And this is cool because we get to hear each other in our groups. We're going to be talking to somebody in our group in a little bit on the next exercise. This next exercise is so relevant. This little church situation. And I say that is my wife and I, we kind of know what's relevant. We've consulted in the UK, the Southeast, a couple places in the Southeast, West Coast, Northwest, Heartland, Midwest, Hope Worldwide, Hope India, and get calls from other places we'll probably never visit in our life. And what's in common with the story there and other stories is we're people. We're people with a story of a movement that began to reach out to the entire world. And where we are in 2016 is not where we wanted to be in 2016. So we want to figure out what will be next. And hang on to the very end today, brothers and sisters, because I have an offering for you on the last slide that I will explain at that time so we can continue the journey. All right? So, glossary of change. I'm going to pick a few people on a couple of these words. Okay. I think we know that critical thinking is not being critical, right? Okay. You know, a person who's been out in the workforce has learned that better, certainly in some disciplines more than others. And I've actually run into ministers, maybe not for some time, but I've run into ministers that have never heard the term critical thinking. So I have a thought is more along the line of critical thinking. What do you mean? You know, it sounds to them like you're going to criticize them. And so it's really good to be careful. One of the papers that I'm going to send to you, if you subscribe to this offering, will be describing critical thinking. So we're not going to spend time here, but I would imagine most of us here know what that means. And what's a good definition of culture? Does somebody want to come up here and say, what's a good definition of culture? Yes.
our group kept it pretty simple. I think in the end, talked about a lot of different aspects that go into culture, background, lifestyle. But what we concluded is it's a way of living or doing things.
Okay. All right. Is that true? Now let's add to that. What else can we add to that? Yes.
We have a way of living and also a way of believing.
Okay, a way of living, believing, and thinking. Okay. Yes.
Kind of taking what they're saying, that being common amongst the group.
Okay, being common amongst the group. Okay. Yes. Societal norms. Okay. Yes. The defining qualities of a group of people. Okay. Yes.
Values for a specific group.
Okay, values for a specific group. This is really capturing it really well. Yes. Okay, I would go with the first word. There is going to naturally be a group thing. There's a nation thing. We have a nation thing going on right now. Yes.
Reflects personality and traits.
Okay, it does often reflect it. Oh, yes. And I would. Who are some prominent people that affect the culture of the United States? Who? Okay, rock stars, but maybe Abraham Lincoln. Some people that help us set ideals. Martin Luther King Jr. help us aspire to see things not through the color of our skin and so forth. JFK for sure. Okay, now, here's the funny thing about culture. Culture by itself is neither bad or good, and it is so much about these societal norms containing these values and so forth. The funny thing about culture, though, is if you're not aware of your culture, you do things subconsciously without even thinking about it. And it just kind of gravitationally needs to go in a certain direction. And so that shows up in decision making. The people outside of a culture will see it and they'll go, wow, why did you do that? I built a friendship with somebody outside of the ICOC right after a crisis in 2003, a minister in the mainline church, a really wonderful man. And I was running an event that I invited him to. And he saw me doing something that we did so much in our culture. I was highly directive. Hey, brother, here's what you need to do. Oh, brother, you need to do this. You need to do this. And he was, I could just see his body was contorting. This is a highly educated person. And so I asked him about it because you guys, with where you came from and reached the world, and military founder, and highly directive and top down, I don't think you guys are even aware of how you might come across as somebody on the outside. I appreciate it. This was very good for me. But you know what? Who does observe that? Our millennials will look at, if I don't do that anymore, but if our millennials saw me doing that, they would be allergic to me. They would. I have a very good relationship with millennials, but they would be allergic to me if I did that. Another thing about culture is it's really hard to change. My dad had an area that we sledded, the last place he lived. It was a real long trail. And there was this place you would go around the corner, and usually you could make it and go all the way down. One particular year, the very first person that went down didn't make the corner. And what happened is it created a divot in the path that everybody else that came after also would go off. We would do everything we can to put more snow, pack it down. Still, every single time people would just go way off because that divot was created that way. And sometimes we have divots in our culture. It's real hard to change something because we have such a leaning. And so we have to work. And the thing we can do to change a culture, because culture can change, is you have a crisis, okay, where you have intentionality. And so this is about intentionality. So let's pick up another word here. Dissent. Is it wrong to dissent?
No.
When is it wrong to dissent? When it's divisive? Okay, when it goes against the Bible. My rule of thumb is, because I believe there's a big difference between dissent and dissentiousness.
Amen.
And dissentiousness polarizes people. And good dissent creates a new and improved conversation. Okay? Dysfunction, I've got trouble with this. Trish and I've gone into work situations, and literally multiple times, each time I got better, but the first time it happened, a minister told me, I just feel like you waylaid me because you said we are dysfunctional. And I was like, oh brother, that's not even an insult. You know, dysfunctional captures underfunctioning, when parts are not fulfilling their best potential, their sweet spot, or when one part's over-functioning to compensate for somebody else underfunctioning. And so odd behaviors happen, but it's not about sin. It can lead to sin, but it's not about sin. So I have to explain it from now on. I don't ever use that word. So I'm giving you a school of hard knocks lesson. Don't tell somebody that their church or their leadership group is dysfunctional without qualifying. Really, really careful. Yes?
You found the word misfunctional.
Misfunctional. That's better. Because they'll probably catch what that one means right away. Okay, let's pick another one here. Hierarchy. We're going to have some fun with this one. The top-down and command and control hierarchy of world history all the way up until about 1940, every organization that existed was like that. And I'm actually writing a book that's related to explaining the whole historical development and then leading to how do you change from a top-down command and control thing. But it's not about getting rid of hierarchy. You know, hierarchy, we see these pyramids, there's one person, and there's three, and then there's nine, and it expands on out. And then there's somebody way at the bottom who is a minion. Right? Okay, no minions in the new hierarchy. The new hierarchy puts at the nodes, instead of always it being a person, it might be a process. This process has higher rank than anybody under it. And we don't move forward unless we've completed the process. That way, somebody can't overrule by saying, hey, I'm the manager. You know, I decided this is what we're going to do. No. We didn't finish the process. So there's other things to put in the hierarchy other than position, rank, and title, and authority. The other thing is a hierarchy that's even highly tiered if it has built-in feedback mechanisms. It moves into a new category. Started in 1940, a biologist by the name of Ludwig von Bertalanffy said, what if we treated all human societal churches, organizations, and nations as living systems that learn, that pass down information, and have safety valves and all sorts of things like that. And some of the best organizations in the world have benefited from that family tree of thought of treating organizations as open systems. You've heard of systems thinking, okay? So hierarchy can be really cool if it's well designed and it's not about rank and position and I'm over you, you know, that sort of thing, okay? Holistic. We have two holistics up here. Does anybody know what the difference is?
W.
The W. Since they are so closely related, when you see that, what do you think of? Mind, body, spirit, thinking whole, all. Yes?
Seeing all the sides of an issue.
Seeing all the sides of an issue, right? Okay, all things work together. Yes?
Is there a difference?
Yes. Holistic tends to lean in the direction of body and maybe even people. Holistic with a W can be systems and parts, mechanical, looking at a problem in the company or whatever. It's not so much about people, but about parts or whatever. But they are exactly the same when it comes to being systems thinking, like not focusing on where the problem appears. Okay, like in plumbing, a pipe may keep breaking every year in the same spot. That might not be the source of the problem. It may be undue pressure from another place. I was an engineer, a technician before that, and we'd have circuit boards that would test. They'd be like 3 feet long, and a part that went bad on one side of the board, just burn a transistor of smoke, was bad because it was the wrong part on the other side of the board. So you don't replace just the problem, you look to what are the causes. And in both forms of holistic thinking, that's what that's about. It relates to another term that's on the next screen. Okay, homeostasis and status quo are not the same thing, but they get used interchangeably, so be careful. If you say, hey, you're part of the status quo, you've just insulted somebody. Okay, but if you say, we've reached homeostasis in the church here, well, that actually may mean we found some normal behavior where we're just kind of in a routine and a rut. It may be kind of an insult. But you know what? A thriving organization where all their parts are functioning well, has homeostasis. It's where all things are in balance. In a perfectly designed system, they're like thriving. So either thriving high or thriving at a low that everybody wants. You know, it's not even thriving, but you're at that low that everybody wants. That can both be described in homeostasis. So you got to be careful when you use these terms. I had a slide with homeostasis at a leaders thing a couple of years ago, and I got corrected by a couple of brothers. Don't use those big words. I told Tricia that happened to me when I came home. My wife teaches in a Montessori school, and she said, yeah, the kids know what that word means. Like the first 3 years of school, you know. And so, but you have to be careful. You have to know your audience, okay? Keystone, we'll go real quick at Keystone. And you probably, how many here have seen the documentary, How Wolves Change Rivers? Oh, I should have looked it up. True story. In the early part of the last century, they removed all wolves out of Yellowstone. In 1985, they were brought back about 16, I believe, somewhere in that vicinity. And Yellowstone had become famished, a lot of trees, foliage, imbalance of creatures, coyotes got out of control. So they brought the wolves back. And here's what happened. By bringing the wolves back, the elk, I believe it was the elk and the deer, no longer ate trees all the way to the ground. Because they kept them to about 4 feet because they were afraid of wolves. And so then the trees would get a chance to grow, birds would come back, the beavers return, and the rivers changed. The ripple effect. And the wolf is called a keystone creature. And every ecological system has keystone creatures, even if it's underwater and reef systems. And the overfishing of whales in Japan can affect bald eagles in North America. It's just amazing. So hey, keystone creature in an organization is somebody who brings regulation and balance and helps the church, like our churches, we want them to flourish. So I help ministers learn how to be a keystone influence. And it really comes down to problem solving in a healthy way, making decisions in a healthy and progressive, transparent way, and inspiring the ranks. And there's more to it than that. But I'm inserting keystone into all my conversations because it's inspiring and ministers like to talk about it. How can I become a keystone leader? You know, so words to help you out here. Okay. We're going to have to move fast. And I'm going to, okay, organic. What's organic mean? Naturally occurring? It is. Carbon-based. Okay, no, organic. What's that? Constantly changing, okay.
Think of grassroots.
Grassroots. Okay, from the bottom up. That's actually so close to what I was going to say. You know, organizations are what they call, like plant life, I might be saying this word wrong, heliotropic. They lean towards where the energy source is. And they're derived from energy, like from the bottom up, and it is natural. And organizations that provide inspiration and a vision, people lean into that vision automatically. They don't need to be compelled and dogged into doing something. They go, yeah, that makes sense to my soul. I feel it is inside of me. That's organic. Now, just trying to be organic is not the solution to everything. Because sometimes organic people are all over the place. Kind of need to be led and have structure and so forth. But that's the positive use of the word organic. Okay, hey, let's hit this one, paradigm shift. What was that word? Where did that come from? Steve Covey? He used to be, where did it get from? It's 1962, does anybody remember? Thomas Kuhn described the world in the 15th century affected by Copernicus. Actually, to be more specific, Copernicus in about 1513 made an observation in a homegrown laboratory that he made. They looked at the skies. He said, the sun doesn't revolve around the earth, we revolve around the sun. And he wrote about it for 40 years. It was kind of kept under wraps except for a small community. Eventually got published after his death. And it led to such a major shift. And then we eventually figured out about the universe and so forth. Galileo took it further. But Copernicus changed our worldview when it eventually got out. We no longer view that the whole universe is swinging around us. That we are swinging around the sun, and the sun in our solar system is also swinging around and moving too. So, get this, that's a paradigm shift. The paradigm shift in science occurs when there's one view, then there's turbulence, and then there's a brand new view, and nobody at all ever believes their earlier view, and they're embarrassed that they ever did. Okay? That's a paradigm shift. It's one of the most misused phrases. We need a paradigm shift in our church, whatever. Okay? I mean, I would say going from infant baptism to adult baptism, that would be a paradigm shift. Okay? But let's try a new method in church. No. And that's how it often gets used out there. A lot of people, it's not just us in our churches, but it does get misused. Let's save it for when it's powerful. Let's just save it for when we're really important. Real quick, wineskins. Oh, you're part of the old wineskins. Is that an insult? Is it used sometimes as an insult? Yeah. I'm not going to do your homework for you. Look at the two parables where Jesus uses it. Same parable, but different gospels. And one time it looks like he's using it to compliment the old wineskins and the old wine. Another time it looks like he's not. And in reality, it's not ever meant to be an insult. So let's not use it in the conversation to be derogatory. Okay? Are we good with that? Okay. Now, co-developing roadmaps. We're going to do our next exercise. And this is such a fun little exercise. I've done case studies like this before. You are going to take this story. I'm going to read it. It involves two couples at the Bridgeway Church in North America with nearly 300 members. Mark Jacobs graduated from the Naval Academy in the early 80s, met and married Deborah, and has served as Bridgeway's evangelist for 7 years. For nearly 3 decades, the two of them have lived in the go anywhere, do anything ethos, or for Jesus ethos. Approaching 60, they have planted 3 churches in 2 continents, including difficult mission fields, and have a respected family life. Mark is considered a great preacher and successfully raised up leaders over the years, and Deborah is a perceptive counselor and trainer of women. Yet it is well known that the ministry that they lead in a burgeoning city has been stuck for the last 2 or 3 years. Liam Carson, age 35, is a lean management specialist for a driverless electric car company that's breaking into a new market. His wife, Olivia, age 31, has a strong background in advertising, now leads a web survey team using Scrum framework at a campus of a Google competitor. You don't need to know what that means. Both Lean and Scrum are methods for maximizing resources for clear goals. That's all you need to know. Liam and Olivia both moved to the city in the last year and have been leading a small group together for about 4 months. They have regularly brought visitors out to church, but their guests don't usually return after their first visit. Olivia began compiling the reasons that their peer co-workers and neighbors were not interested in the church, and Liam suggested they act upon their shared observations. Liam approached Mark and asked for an appointment with himself, Olivia, Mark, and his wife, and they want to have a meeting in order to share some observations about why they think that the growth of the Bridgeway ministry has stalled, especially at their age and social demographic. Liam and Olivia hope to convince Mark that it has something to do with lengthy sermons, heavy insider language used by members of meetings where visitors are present, aesthetics and worship music that probably reflect boomer members, but not younger members, and an overall corporate church structure. They also have some ideas that involve moving away from the traditional Sunday format and location and reaching out to the community. On the day before Liam and Carson are to meet with Mark and Deborah Jacobs, they set aside time to discuss their approach to the meeting. Now, we're not going to talk in our small groups about what the answers are. We only have time for these 2 things. Discuss the priority wave that Liam and Olivia should focus on. Should they try to do all these things at once, or what's the priority? Or one might affect the other, Develop a step-by-step roadmap. It could just be a few steps. I have almost 10 that I'll show you, but you may only come up with a few. Focusing on what Liam and Olivia should do in order to persuade Mark and Deborah
The goal is for them to be making a wave together. You're not trying to make a wave against the leader. You're trying to get the leader to buy into a wave and co-author it. Okay? And right now, at least 4 steps. So break into similar-sized groups. It could even be the same groups. Okay, let's pull back together. You don't have to move. But let's talk about our story here. Can I hear an amen if this seems like it resonates in your world? Okay, good. And do you understand this whole concept of trying to align yourself with the minister if you're in the role of Liam and Olivia? You understand that concept? Or trying to go together, win over, so that us can make something happen. Okay. If I didn't say that, I think somebody could walk out of the room thinking, I need to make a wave up against my minister. Okay? And I don't want to be held responsible for careless approaches, So, and there's a huge difference, really. And I am a big believer that people can change. Even people can change paradigms. But they got to be given the chance and the play to the best side of their nature. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the process that you found. The first question was discuss the priority wave. What was the most important wave that you thought in your group? Yes?
Well, I think our group found it difficult to find that priority.
Okay.
Because it really depends on who's doing the talking and what the most important. To me, it was aesthetics. So to someone else, it was the length of the sermon. And so it really.
I appreciate you said that and you were honest about that, because then what you do is you discuss the possibility of a survey to see. He said that we couldn't come up with a wave. We all thought differently about the wave. So, and that could lead to a conversation. Let's do a survey, see how the church feels, see how people think. Tricia. Yeah, when people speak, stand up and face the crowd. That's very good. Okay, Jen Becknell. Wavemaker, Jen Becknell.
Well, we actually didn't discuss this, but I feel like the first wave that needs to be accomplished is for the Carsons to get the Jacobs to really believe we want to be a part of a team solution that is going to get us. We are not adversaries. We're not here to criticize you. We want to work with you to come up with something.
Yeah, you probably didn't hear, but she said the first thing is to compel, or we are with you. We want to do this together. We're not here to be critics. We want to work with you, beside you. We want to help. Yes, right here.
Yeah, we just talked about the approach, really, that, the evangelist problems that we saw, the lack of growth. One evangelist is not going to know there's a problem with lack of growth.
Right.
They already know that. So the other problem we saw was the culture. There's something in the culture of the church that needs to change. So those are two monumental topics.
Right.
So we thought the first meeting with the couple would be more like she said.
Yeah.
We're on the team. We want to help.
Yes. Very good. Very good. Man, you.
Yeah. Well, I think the backgrounds are so radically different, in just age-wise, training-wise. The first meeting probably shouldn't be about any issues in the church. The first meeting should probably just be hearing their war stories.
Yeah.
How it's been planning churches. I think the current leaders need to probably more than anything feel respected and appreciated before you can get them to do anything.
Okay. First meeting should not be about trying to bring the change. It's basically the relational, getting to know what's going on there, and making sure that you're aligned. And so what you're saying is so profound, because we can't assume. We got to get rid of any assumption that we are all good with each other, because you have to be good with each other, even great with each other, and then nudge from there. Now let's assume you are great with each other, and there's just this good chemistry, but you are bringing up an awkward topic. Okay, yes.
Well, we talked about in our group that having Olivia and Liam just let Deborah and Mark know, hey, this is
Yes, very good, very good. Over here, please.
Yeah, this is really straight home because my wife's highly evangelistic. We brought visitors that have stopped coming. And so the issue is that the ministry is stalled.
Yeah.
To me, that phrase right there, not the solutions they think might be it,
Yeah.
but there's something wrong. Our visitors are not coming back.
Yes, this is not the time to propose solutions. And so very, very good. This is good. Over here.
We went over a bunch of different concepts, but just the fact that, they have so much experience in leading so many churches in such diverse cultures, they understand, currently the evangelists already understand that there are differences. You're going to have differences from one continent to another, so that's not the issue. But the corporate culture is probably not something that they want. They have no experience with the corporate in their history.
Right.
They're all church. So the corporate culture,
It came before they got there 7 years
it was
ago.
already there. So if you get that, it's like, what is the real purpose? What's the real structure according to the Bible that you should be having?
Right.
Everything else falls down below that.
Yes. I like what you said. It's about being inquisitive about what kind of culture we want to have, rather than condemning the one that we do. So that's very good. Way back there, yes. That's you.
First of all, we said we really need to pray and go into it with the right heart
Yep.
before, but I think if you go in and ask the leaders, okay, what are your frustrations? Where do you want to take the church? Are there any programs that you really have a vision for that you would like to initiate?
Yeah.
And, share their ideas. And then I think to share that I want to, okay, how about if we help by championing this for you?
Yeah.
You have this goal, let's champion this for you, and you can still work with your ideas in that champion solution, but you're helping them as a team member instead of.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Now, what we're going to do now is go through the next section here is what are some of the steps as you move the ball down the court a bit. What are some good exploring way forward? I actually have a roadmap that I have developed and been using for a couple of years that I found is really working. I'm going to tell you a case study about it. That you will get it if you sign up for my offer. Okay. But I want to hear what's coming from here first. What steps can you move? Let's say the couples are on the same page. They want to make a wave, but they're not. Let's say they're not fully on the same page because they're not sharing the same information yet. But there's no issue of tension between them. Yes.
From like an organizational development standpoint, a lot of times when you deal with large corporations, like I'm trained on Wall Street, JP Morgan, don't always roll everything out at once to everybody.
Yeah.
So you start with a small prototype. So sometimes the best way to show the leaders what you mean and whether or not something works is to start with a small scale or a small group.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want you to do this, and then as your group grows and you show that your ideas and ingenuity and all the things that you have in mind actually work.
Right.
Now it's time to roll it out on a larger platform. Look, this one was right across the but people are going to say, why don't we try some of the things that they're doing?
Okay, so this is a stage, a suggestion somewhere in the scheme that means basically we want to get the pilot, experiment, see how it works, to take it to a greater scale. This comes from someone who's worked in corporate America. That is very good language for that. Yes?
I just want to give you some feedback. Apparently, when we're standing up talking, they actually can't hear.
Still can hear even when we're standing up.
You can give a synopsis.
Tell you what, we're going to, okay, great. I'm going to, I did there, but I'll do better in the future here. Another step. Yes?
Hey, Steve. One of the things we talked about was that there's a little built-in commonality here, and that so the Jacobs, the old couple, Mr. Double, it says that they respect the family life. But my guess is, our guess here is that persons and their kids are probably around the same age.
Good.
Know each other. Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility.
There's a big age gap between the two couples. Yeah.
Yeah. So for as they sit down saying, so So, tell us how did, your kind of how did things go when you were
Right.
with your kids and into their 20s and 30s, and maybe how you're still kind of, seeing them in life and helping them or whatever, and kind of learning from them, their own parenting, their relationship. I mean, this.
Okay, I'm going to say back to you what I think you're saying in my language.
Yeah.
Okay, that model wanting the minister to be able to learn from you by you learning from them. But by the way, that's a very effective technique that's used in coaching and persuasion, as you set the tone of a dynamic between two people by tell me what's going on, how did you do that, how could I do that? And then they're much more likely to be able to be receptive to something from you. There was a sister over here, yes.
I think, okay. They collectively decide what.
Collectively decide what?
So that they can then determine the how. You have to know your what.
You have to know your what.
Your how.
Very good, very good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take you through a couple of sequences that I've developed. And the first one is prepare yourself, okay? Really good self-evaluation. Know who you are. Know how people perceive you. If your social style is really dramatic, you want to know that, don't you? If you dominate discussions, you would want to know that, right? If you have a reputation of being controlling, you would want to know that, right? Okay, these kind of things actually play in very significantly. And to take some time to do this self-evaluation. A statement of clarity. You may not even be sure what you want. You got to write things down, even if it's just a half a page. And I emphasize it's better to be short than long. What is it that's really frustrating you? You may be targeting something that's bothering you. The insider language thing may be bugging you about what's going on in church, but that may not be the big thing. It may be something deeper, and so really know what it is you're trying to aim at, and then, be mindful of previous efforts. People may have been, maybe even this couple that's leading, has been trying to do this, Mark and Deborah have been working at it. Tell me what's worked so far. Remember, they've only been there a year, less than a year. And give us a sense of what you've been trying, what's worked and what's not worked. And to do that, this comes from the book that I've recommended, The Rebels at Work. One way is to ask good questions of ourselves, and a lot of people respect in the organization. What's beneath what's going on here? What has foiled previous change efforts like this one? What can I learn from those? Should I continue to try to advance this idea? What might happen if I let it go? And so forth. There's a lot of questions that she proposes asking to be mindful of the past. And then this is all before you get started. This is just for you as a Wavemaker. An initial inquiry. Strive to learn and appreciate the current issues that absorb the attention of the leadership. And I've already said that, and some people have already said that too. But it's this, what's going on the inside. Okay, so that's just beforehand. Now the roadmap is a bit different. You want to figure out what processes are already there. We have a cool thing in Chicago. I have to really hold up the leadership of the Chicago church. I think Ed Dawson and Chris Zillman came up with the idea. If you have an idea, have a conversation, have a brief piece of paper, have a longer document, we'd have a meeting. And I don't remember the exact schematic of it all, but there's a flow way to have an idea, get traction, and give feedback. And really it works. 2 years ago, we were going to have a change of our downtown ministry, a suburban ministry, 2 other ministries, and then 3 in the Midwest, all at the same exact time. In my opinion, that all the changes they were making were all better than what we had, so they were all great ideas. But the right thing the wrong way can send a bad message. And so I thought, we've grown up as a church, let's respect our members. We don't need to be just given a new minister anymore. We can also weigh in, so we created a process. Now, I created this a couple of years ago, starting with our work in Hawaii, where the whole church can get to be part of what's going on and vetting at a tiered level. Ultimately, there's a decision making, and boom, that's this. So what we did in these 6 things all at the same time is we created a process, expanded upon the one they already had, and decided to go to all 6 locations, 3 churches, 3 city ministries in Chicago, and said, we have an idea that's going to be involved changing all these personnel. We actually believe it's going to improve every situation. We believe you're going to like it, but we're only going to tell the leadership of each ministry first, and we're going to vet it across them, but in order to protect confidentiality of people, in case an idea doesn't work, we're going to create fictional names of situations you don't need to know. So we have fictional cities. We have Megapolis, Batman, stuff like this, Metropolis, whatever. But anyway, people got to hear who would be coming to their ministry if the idea worked, ask questions, and really find out if they were qualified and what their life and ministry history was. And then we would go before the bigger group, and all these 6 locations, go before the big ministry and tell them about it, have the fictionalized names, and then ask them what they think, and they would have a short period of time, and we wouldn't pull the trigger if there wasn't buy-in. Well, there was buy-in in all 6 situations, but what was even better is there were a lot of tears. Tears of gratitude for feeling respected, that who's going to lead in my ministry for me for the next 5 years, I get to be considered in. And you really respected us as a church. And I saw the tears, I heard the gratitude. The cool thing about that is if it ended up being a bad idea, everybody's already bought into it. Nobody's pointing fingers. So I've been teaching that roadmap out there, but I want to hold up the Chicago church for this. So you want to make sure you get the process right. Know what processes are available. Next is start with a conversation. Never send an email or a letter without having the conversation, saying it's coming. And have your spouse and your friends read it first to get rid of anything that might have little toxins or whatever, And then your first message, give that prepared statement that you did, your statement of clarity. You want to give it, but you want to personalize it. Have the warmth in it. And because you want buy-in. Then you want to get initial feedback. And here is where it gets to be tailored for each situation. And sometimes they want to do it through different channels and different leadership structures or whatever. But you get feedback and then you proceed. Now, even when the idea is embraced enthusiastically, like we could do something like that. Somebody says, see, we could do something like that. We still might be going back over the messaging, the feedback, and the proceeding. We might even back up to the full process. Are we good with this? Ready to go? The idea is to make sure there's the most amount of buy-in. And I've seen a number of decisions roll out in Chicago over the last decade where it went out further and further and further until by the time we got out to the whole church, people pretty much knew about it and so forth. So you might have to loop. And representation-based vetting. When Trish and I were in Hawaii, we were going to hire a couple, and we created this process where the word out, we want to hire somebody. Here's their resume. Or here's what we're looking for. Here's the resumes of people that are applying. Here's the core group. Here's a further representation group. And then here's the whole church. And when we hired Anthony and Sam Galang through this process, it took 16 days. I think all but one person wanted to hire them right on the spot. And the one person was on vacation during part of the process. So it was, I would say we had pretty much unanimity, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever seen. And what's happened in Hawaii has been fantastic. And so anyway, so representation-based vetting. Do you have any questions for me at this point? We're wrapping up here in like 2 minutes here. So, yes.
Schedule is so crazy that you have one chance to make a big impact with him. Like, what do? You don't have time to create this, friendship with him first. You don't have time to share these things before.
Yeah.
The big idea.
Okay, what if you don't have time to get with that person? They're not very available. You don't have the time to build that rapport or whatever. And okay, a couple things you can do. You can also work with those close to that person and make it like 3 of you get together, and then you get to work with the person that you have more time with that's close to them. But you also ask them, I know you're busy, can I meet you at the gym? I can come your way, let's do it early in the morning, can I run some errands with you, do some stuff like that. But they may be a very functional person where they say, hey, we'll need to spend time together, I'm really interested in hearing your idea. Send it to me. And that may be personality dependent, that might be a great idea. Okay, yes, back here. Yeah. Could you say that again? Because I want to make sure we get this.
Sorry, that is not. We've been talking more about top down, like he's going to be either evangelist or
yeah.
but what if it seems like it's
Okay, if the issue is more of a bottom-up than top-down, well, what I'm assuming is we don't even know what the issue is until we move further along. But if the issue is more bottom-up, and even a great idea is having trouble coming from the down, on down, this is where it's really good to do surveys. And I've been part of those, I've been in them, and I've executed them, and to get a real assessment. And if a core leadership is on the right page, and the next level leadership is on the right page, but at the bottom, we have to dissect what's the reason. Has there been an emotional, spiritual disconnect for a long period of time? Are they doing bad spiritually? What are the other vital signs? And it's a great question. It's too big to answer here in this slot. But at least we're talking about getting motion. Yes, one more question.
How do you do those surveys?
Okay, the best way to do a survey, in my opinion, is if it has sensitive questions, is that somebody's running it that's not on the inside of it all. Because there's private things that will be sometimes posted. And you want to give people some suggestions for decorum, of course. We're not going to talk about people in a survey response by name. But if you really want to find out reality, you've got to make sure that the process for getting reality is one that people trust. And so, as a consultant, Trish and I have done surveys. We did it in Miami-Dade, we did the whole South Florida Church, we did some of the other projects we've done, and I've helped other people do them. And then Dave Eastman did one in our ministry, but they weren't highly sensitive questions, but there were like 50 of them. It's about worship, and taste, and aesthetics, and all that good stuff. Visitors, and demographics, and he did that through a computer thing, like a survey monkey. That one was fine for him to run because it wasn't probing at elephants in the room and stuff like that. I think that you can do them internally. If there is a known problem, though, if there's some serious problem, that's good to bring in somebody from even another ministry in the same church, or bring in some person in the brotherhood that's respected. Yes? No, well, that's a technical question. You can survey a link. You can send a survey monkey. It's literally a website. You can build a survey. And then, or you can send a document that people can type into, or they can fill out something at church and hand it in. We're going to have to move along. Those are really good questions about surveys, because I'm going to talk about survey again in a second here. Here's my offer. If you go to this website, follow this link, Wavemaker offer, off the new website, mydtconnect.org, Wavemaker offer, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get my 9-page notes, including all the facts about those Wavemakers I told you about. You're going to get book reviews. And you are going to get, the roadmap that I told you about, a full description of each stage. So you'll get that, okay? Then here's the cool thing, in my opinion. Okay. On January the 1st, I released a 17-page paper called Renaissance, When Light Cuts Through the Haze. Part 1 was an invitation. It includes a survey of 15 questions. And in that survey of 15 questions is, what did you like about ICOC 1.0, the old? What did you not like? 2.0, what did you like, not like? What would you like in 3.0? And other really crucial important questions. I sent out to 600 people. I've got 100 responses. The surveys, I'm learning some amazing things. I am writing out of this material proposals, and I believe I have a relationship with a lot of people in ICMC. I believe it can be helpful in giving a sample about some things. It uses the story of Hezekiah, a major Renaissance leader, trailblazer, waymaker in the Old Testament. The second one came out in June. Is called, same thing, Part 2, Adventure. It's two of the best articles I've ever written. I mean, they're really good stuff. And I love to write, and I love to read and all that. These are really good. Another Hezekiah story. And a story about the Renaissance. And then the third installment comes out in October with survey results. And this is all about wave making. It's about breakthroughs. It's about trailblazing. It's about reinventing of oneself. And it's about passing on the torch to the next generation and dealing with cross-generational issues. Some of the survey information is really to find out how people think based on their station in life. And I want to invite you to be part of the process. Once you get these documents, you can turn in the survey. Then you will be able to receive further things along this discussion and this conversation from me. And if you don't want any more, you can unsubscribe. but I'm inviting you to a conversation and access to me, what we're doing through Bridging International, organizational health, which is really health for growth, becoming resilient, and providing tools for being resilient. And so that's the offer, and I want to say thank you for being alert in the afternoon. Amazing, you did great. Thank you very much.